right now. Okay. Hi guys, it's Jenna Pecor, and today I have a guest with me that I have not spoken with a lot, but I'm really glad that we connected. This is Todd Mayo. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Jenna. How's it going?
Going really well. It's a beautiful day outside.
That's awesome. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I don't know if you've gotten to get outside today, but I got to go out and walk, and it is so gorgeous.
I walk around the backyard at least twice a day.
That's good. That's good. So Todd, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you work, and you know, some of your background and what you do.
Awesome. So I'm a financial advisor, and a lot of times when you throw that term out there, people, so what does that mean? You know, what does your job entail? So basically, I've been working in the finance industry for 21 years. I started out in banking. I've done everything at a bank, as far as from being a teller all the way to being management, vice president, commercial lender, so just about everything. About 6 years ago, I took a step from that and kind of went a little deeper into financial investing. And so that's what I do now, is I help people with their financial investments. So it could be anything from a college savings fund for your kids. It could be managing your entire retirement, 401k plans, things like that. And then also helping people pass generational wealth down to kids, grandkids, things like that, without taxes and things like that. So basically, I play with people's money for a living.
I bet you've been getting a lot of calls in the last couple months.
So I have had a couple. One of the things, it's very interesting. People are in two boats right now. They're in the, yeah, it's going to pass, which I'm really surprised at how many people that has just been. When I call them, they're like, yeah, it's going to pass. So, you know, and then the others that are, yeah, extremely scared. You know, Todd, I just lost $200,000. What happened? I'm like, well, you didn't lose it yet, you know, because you didn't take it out of the market, stuff like that. So yeah, and kind of managing and working with people's fears. And one of the things I'll tell you, and I just kind of caught on this early on when working in the business, was that I would say, you know, hey, okay, this is our plan, this is our strategy. We've ran different models, and they say 2008 will never happen again, but it did happen. And so, you know what, let's include that in our model just to see, you know, how our model holds up through that. And so it's kind of funny. I've done that for several years. Now we come back, and that's how our conversation kind of starts, especially with the folks that are really upset and nervous. As I said, remember, we planned for this. We planned way back then for this, because we know it's going to go up and down, you know.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Is I have a client of mine right now. She's a cash buyer, and she's been doing investing for quite some time. So she's on the boat of, I've been there, I've done this. Like this is this, yeah, she's like, she's more frustrated than anything. She's not scared at all. She's just like, just ready, you know. But then you have other people that just aren't really familiar with investing, or maybe are new to it, or don't understand how that all works. And something that I loved about, well, first of all, let me go ahead and say this, since this is the Faces of Grand Prairie podcast. So you don't live in Grand Prairie, but you do have a little bit of history with Grand Prairie. And
yeah, absolutely. So golly, I managed a bank down there for, with them a total of 7 years. So I was in there about 5 years. And so during that time, really got to be connected with a lot of the great Grand Prairie folks. Got to meet Miss Ruth Jackson on several occasions, and she would come by our place all the time, just a sweet lady. And then, of course, her daughter, Georgia. And so I was really involved with the chamber there as well. Helped them with a lot of their programs and stuff they do. Oh my goodness, just too many things to remember. And then served on the board and the executive board there at the chamber for a while. And know Mayor Ron Jensen real well. And it's just, so yeah, I have a lot of connection there. Still have a lot of business connections there. Love a lot of the events they do at the Asian Times Square. Go down and visit those folks quite often and know them personally as well. So so that's kind of where I'm at with as far as Grand Prairie. I do have some Grand Prairie clients. I actually go all over the Metroplex. That is where my banking career has taken me. And so I have pockets here and there. So, you know, if you had somebody that said, hey, I want to meet him in person or whatever, you know, once all this is over, you know, then, I do most of my client meetings at Starbucks. So.
Oh, that's good. Well, God, you're missing it then. If you're a Starbucks person, you know, that goes in and actually sits down, that's definitely something I miss it. I'm missing that right now too. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Grand Prairie Chamber has done some really awesome stuff. Just a shout out. This has nothing to do with our conversation, but just kind of a shout out of the way that the new president, her name's Michelle. She's really, man, stepped up with like connecting people, making sure that we're all still, you know, a part of feeling like there's still business going on, because there is, and you know, life is still going on, and we still have, there's still things to be considered in all this. And one of the ways that you and I connected, like one of the things that I found really interesting was, what was it that you called it? You sent me this plan, but you called it something that I thought was really interesting on Facebook Messenger the other day.
Okay. Yeah.
You remember what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, we're talking about having a soft landing.
Soft landing, that's what it was. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we were talking, you were mentioning people that had lost their jobs and how to kind of deal with that from a financial perspective. And I just thought that was so valuable for people to know. So yeah, maybe expand on, if you could just talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is one of the things I've kind of, again, it's really interesting to see how kind of crunch time is kind of here. And when you position yourself kind of year over year, making sure you're doing the right thing, making sure all of a sudden when it comes crunch time, you're right there and you're putting people into the right perspective and everything. And so I called it a plan I developed. I worked through a system with some clients a couple years ago. And basically he had walked into work one day. He'd been there, goodness, 20 years. And they said, by the way, your services are no longer needed. Thank you. Have a good day. That's it. And him and his wife were just completely devastated because that was all of that. I mean, they lived paycheck to paycheck like everybody else. And they didn't know where they were going to eat the rest of the week or the next week, you know? And so we started from that level and then kind of just back down a little bit and back down a little bit. But one of the things that I was able to do was, and this is unbeknownst to him, was he had been putting money away in a 401k. And he had several $100,000. And that was the interesting thing. Yeah.
Wow.
20 years putting back 3-4% of your paycheck, you know? And he just, and he's a super nice guy, not the most sophisticated, you know, in job and that, but he's like signed up for everything. He did everything he was supposed to do. Well, now coming back on the flip side, his wife is talking to my wife, and she's taught us just, and I said, well, ask him to have a 401k. And I'm sure he did. Well, needless to say, we were able to use some of that money. And here's what I've seen happen is, people will say, okay, I do have this 401k. So here, I'm just going to take all of it out and then we're going to be good. Or they'll say, well, no, I still can't touch it because I'm not retiring yet. Or there's going to be a penalty on it. Or, you know, we have all of these built-in excuses that we go for, right? And so what we did is we took a measured approach. Okay, let's move it over. So we can handle it. Let's take care of it. Okay, what do we need for the next month? Let's start there. Okay, what does 6 months look like? So we're going to plan this all out. We're going to stretch this all out, okay? So that we have a plan. So you know what? You can go home, you can breathe, and you can go home and you can sleep tonight, okay? So let's start there, right? So, and then within 2 weeks, he had another job, making about the same pay. All of a sudden, life was great, but Todd was the hero. I didn't do anything really. But what I found out, and as I began to look at it, and this is kind of one of the things I mentioned to you the other day, was if you look at some psychological things, so there's this thing called Maslow's Law of Hierarchy, and, you know, it talks about our needs as humans and so on and so forth. And really, when a person or even a family, their income is suddenly cut off, it doesn't take you down a level or two. It takes the very bottom of everything off, right? Because now you no longer have any safety. You don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know, are they going to come get our cars? Then I can't go to work. And just everything, that we're going to lose our house. And then it just kind of all starts bubbling together. And people really have difficulty kind of separating that. And so that's where I can kind of come in. And interestingly enough, I do have a degree in social psychology. So I can also explain why my people are investing. So when I kind of mix those two together, I'm like, okay, you know what my job is today is to sit down and just let them visit. Just let them get out whatever they need to get out, kind of like a counselor, you know? And that is how I've been able to just kind of help bring people through some of those situations. Now we're at a place, we haven't seen a lot of layoffs yet here in Texas. Unfortunately, I'm afraid it's gonna come. within the next couple of months.
Mhm.
And so, I want people to know there's resources out there. Want people to know, hey, if things are going to happen, it's going to look crazy, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, one of the things you and I were talking about is I think that what the hardest it's going to be for, in my opinion, is not the people that have struggled financially for the past however long. They're used to being in a struggle financially. It's the people that have always paid their bills on time, have always had a job, have always been responsible, have always done the right thing, have never had to call a debtor or creditor to tell them that they need to pay bills late. Like, I think that those people are going to have a really hard time understanding how to live in a world on the other side of that for a minute. And what I loved about what you were saying was, a lot of times having somebody like yourself that can, number one, validate those feelings, and number two, say, listen, this is not as bad as you think it is. Like, listen, calling a collector, and especially in the middle of all this, and explaining to them there might be some options, is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you're not responsible. So I loved that that you mentioned that, because I think that that's very important for people to understand right now.
And it really is. And again, coming from the lending industry, is 9 times out of 10, if people would just contact us, if they would have just called us or answered when we called them, then we could work with you. But giving them the silent treatment, that is where, it can get really hairy really quick. And especially, like you said, in this time, there's several banks and home lenders. Well, you're in the home lending business, have said, hey, look, by the way, don't make your payments for the next 3 months. We're cool with it. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have to make those payments.
Right.
But right now, while you're struggling, it's a good time for that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's definitely one of those things that I think it's a skill that some people are just going to have to learn. And, is just to not be in denial of the situation, just a temporary blip. And we just have to figure out how to deal with it. And I think that putting faces to names, being able to see someone like yourself, you're not this big bad person on the other end of the line that is just looking to take your stuff away. Like they're really person, those people really are there to help you.
Yeah. And the last time you're going to go see a financial advisor is when you just lost your job.
That's very true. That is very, very true.
That's typically not your first call to make,
Right. Well, and there was one thing that I thought about. I was scrolling through Facebook, like I do from time to time these days. And I saw an ad for an app, and it was about a will. And it was, having a will for your kids. And, that's also something that during this time, you just don't know what might happen. And those are things that nobody likes to really think about, but are things that might be necessary. Planning ahead, planning for the future, planning for all those things,
Absolutely. So a portion of what I do in the financial advisor realm is sell life insurance. It can be used as an event, so on and so forth. Selling a lot of life insurance right now. A lot of people just, okay, let's go ahead, and we've been talking about it, well, let's just go ahead. And that's interesting to me, but I can see it, so that is really what I'm going for, is to say people are kind of just stepping back and taking stock. So doing a will, that is a very, very good thing, making sure what is your life insurance like, do you have enough, just get an opinion right now. Maybe now's not the time for you to move on that, but now's a good time for you to kind of just stop and just examine what you've got. So
what about people organizing all of their documents for if something were to happen? Now is a perfect time to do that.
That's huge.
Nobody wants to ever do that because it's boring.
No. Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think people should pay attention to, is doing that. So with you being in the financial industry, I don't know if you can speak to this or not. Like, do you feel like your contemporaries, your colleagues and everybody, what is their sense of everything going on? Are they freaking out? Or are they just like, we're going to get through it. It'll be okay.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, it's funny because the short answer is this, is that, this is a blip on the radar, right? That we're going to get through this. Kind of a 2008 scenario, okay? Things happen and we're going to move through it. So typically we talk in terms of bear markets and bull markets, all right? So a bull market is basically like a bull would charge somebody and then lift their head up. So when the market's going up, that's a bull market, right? When a bear fights you, it brings its claws and it strikes down. So when the market's going down, that's a bear market.
Is that really why they're called that?
That is it. That is it. That's why there is, on Wall Street, there is a bull and he's got his head down. And then on the other side of the street, it's a bear with a claw.
I mean, I'm a pretty intelligent person, but I've never even thought about why they call it a bear or bull. Like, I knew which one was which. I just didn't know what they called it.
I'll be honest with you. I did not hear that full explanation until I got into the industry. So, I'm with you. I knew what it was, and okay. All right. So it's funny because the average bull market, right? So this is going back to let's see, to about 1989. Okay. So we're going back that far back. The average bull market is 7 years and 4 months long. Okay. It's almost 8 years of good, right? The average return on an investment using the S&P as a standard, right, is 396.9% during that time frame. That's the average.
Wow.
Right? Okay. But now let's talk about bear markets, right? The average length of a bear market is 13 months during that same time frame. That's it.
Wow.
And the average loss during that time frame, 42%. So, it's kind of when you step back and look at over the long haul, right? And again, back to what I kind of alluded to earlier with my clients. Okay, hey, 2008 is never going to happen again, but it did happen. So let's see what happens to you. Well, again, we dropped about 40% to a couple of weeks ago. Now we're back up to about a 20% from the very top of where we were. So things are going okay, right? Now we've got to get businesses back online, okay? A lot of businesses are going to report negative earnings this quarter because they're closed, I will say that Netflix, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, did their quarterly earnings report. They made more money than they expected to make.
This is the funny part, okay? And I'm gonna get into this discussion with you for as much as you can say to me without, but number one, well, first of all, going back to 2008 and having been in real estate and all that stuff, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, and I said, look, we are in the same type of situation. The difference is that nobody did anything wrong to get us here.
Right.
So, like 2008, there's not really an enemy. We're dealing with something that's a financial situation, but before this started, it wasn't like we were dipping. It was,
we were skyrocketing.
Yes, exactly. So it's not, to me, that's what gave me a little bit of relief, at least that there wasn't this long trajectory of down, down, down that everybody saw happening. It stopped. So I think that's important. I don't know why I think that's important, but I feel like that's an important part of all this. Would you agree? I don't know.
No, absolutely. You're 100% correct there, because what we saw was, and this has to do with a lot of the current administration's policy towards businesses. So businesses were gaining, right? They were having good profits. The economy was hot. There were a lot of regulations that have been stripped away, allowing different companies to do things more profitably without restraint. And so we saw a lot of positive growth, okay? So you're right, nobody did anything wrong necessarily, okay? But then you also, believe it or not, there's a couple of storms that kind of grew together at the same time, okay? So we have the COVID virus and all of that, right? But the second side of it, and I think this is where our conversation started the other day, was actually what had happened in the oil industry.
Yes.
So what had happened in the oil industry is we have become, by all expert standards, energy independent. So we don't need Russia and we don't need Saudi Arabia's oil. Well, they're not real happy about that. But then we've also got kind of a newer ruler in Saudi Arabia. And then we have Russia, who's Russia, right? And so they were getting together and they were saying, well, you know what? I'm gonna produce as much oil as I want to. And Saudi Arabia's like, no, because we have more than you, so we'll produce more than you and drive you out of the business. Well, so they unleash all of this oil. Then the COVID virus hits.
Right.
Right? So now we have all of this. So that's kind of a separate thing in and of itself. So that has really hurt the oil industry. Originally, I'm from Odessa, And it was kind of funny because they were having this little disturbance, and I was talking to some of my friends out there. So in January and February, they were already doing layoffs. They were already having some crazy
Really?
Yeah. And that had to do with that totally other situation. Then we have the COVID virus, where now we stop all use, and I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the airplanes just parked here and there. We have a cargo airport up here close by us at Alliance, and there are tons of commercial airliners just parked. They have nowhere else to park them.
How about 40 cents for a gallon of gas? For the
Right.
people that like have Kroger miles.
Exactly. I wish there was a Kroger around the corner. Yeah. So no, nobody did anything wrong necessarily. Now, let me back up to kind of another statistic, right? This isn't the first time that we've had a pandemic outbreak. 2003, there was SARS. 2009, there was a swine flu. 2014, Ebola. The Zika virus in 2016. So this one is different than some of those other ones, but also how we've reacted is some other ones. One of the cool things about my position, and you asked about my colleagues, is I get to do some really cool video calls and chats with some high-level folks. And one guy, we actually was on a video call with him earlier today, Larry Fink. So he's the head of BlackRock Investments. They manage $6 trillion of investments.
Wow.
That is, just huge amount. And he's also one of Trump's advisors on getting the thing back open. So the reason I say all of that is to say the next statistic that I'm going to give is just kind of eye-opening. And it kind of puts into perspective why the administration reacted the way it did. Through some knowledge, through some of their information they passed down, is they said the early initial estimates. So before we started having deaths, but the early initial estimate that this could possibly take out 1% of the United States population. That's why they reacted like they did. And I told my wife, I said, no, we're not getting the whole story because they don't act like this. And again, that was their fear. Now we can always say, oh, well, it really wasn't ever that big, or it was because of whatever the reason is it didn't pan out like that. But that was their fear. And so that has made the economic challenge that we have. I would rather kind of go through this than to see potentially 3 million lives lost,
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point to make in all that. And I want to go back to something you said a little bit ago to kind of, focus on how you and I came to start having this conversation.
Right.
I'm very much about asking people that actually know as best they can, that have the knowledge base to answer certain questions. So the reason that you and I started having a conversation was because I said, I see that there's a negative oil barrel price. And I checked on various different websites, and I think I shared BBC or somebody, which I usually trust. It's not like it's one of these websites that just says so. And I was like, I know that that's bad, but I don't know why, and I don't know how that works. I said, so can someone in oil and gas please explain to me how all this plays out? And I appreciated your response because you said it's more of a scary headline than anything else, and you kind of had an explanation. And I think that right now it is so important that as people that are consuming so much information, that we go to people like yourself or go to people that are in these industries and say, this is my fear. This is my thought. I might not be thinking correctly about this. Can you explain to me whether I'm on the right track or not? Because I think sometimes our emotions just catch us, and then we just, that's just how it works. So I love that, how you're explaining all this. And I think discussing history, talking about how things have happened in the past, gives people a great deal of comfort. It might scare some people. To me, it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable,
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing I think about this is just we have reacted so differently. So yes, we all know that there's been pandemics, but nothing's ever been like this. So people we don't know what to do. It's given so much anxiety. But then something else that you said that I really thought was interesting. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I believe in the capitalist ideals. I believe that anybody can pop up and come up with a great idea that tomorrow could be great. And so when I look at this and I think, on one hand, we have all these things going down, but then you have the Netflixes and the Zooms and the this and the Disney Pluses and all these things that people are using right now. So on one hand, it's bad, but on another hand, it's good. I think that's important to remember. It's perspective, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's always about perspective. And again, even, oh goodness, we can go back and talk about 2008. There were some things that were going down and things that were going up. I was talking to an ice cream vendor, say 2010, and we were just joking about that. And he's like, yeah, that was the best year of our company history, 2008, because, everybody needed something to calm the nerves,
right.
So if you can just pick which one those are. Now, here's the thing. So the restaurant industry is really struggling right now, right? We all know that, but we're all still eating. So that means the retailers, the Krogers, the Walmarts, the food, grocery stores are doing really good right now. And so it's, being able to step back and say, okay, who's doing what, and then I was looking this morning. So Johnson & Johnson is a company that I follow, and they posted their record highest ever today, and so those are interesting things to look at. Now, I'm not saying run out and buy Johnson & Johnson, but I'm saying that, so you're seeing the different industries, and tech is really booming right now overall. So, it's interesting because of some of it in China, and we won't jump off in that, but so, right. Yeah, so you're right on in saying that. As far as the scary headlines, let me just throw this at you real quick, because I've been saying this a lot since February, is people say, well, the market was down today. The market was up today. There is no the market, okay? What it is there are several indexes. And so the term index just means measuring sticks, right? So 3 of them that you hear a lot about is the Dow Jones Industrial, okay? You hear about the S&P 500, which S&P stands for Standard & Poor's. They're a rating agency, so they rate businesses. And then the NASDAQ, which is mainly tech stuff. We won't talk about that. Well, the Dow Jones Industrial is the 30 largest industrial type businesses. So if you bought 1 share of each, that's how much it would cost you, okay? Which is like, it's at 23,000 right now, okay? That's 30 companies, okay? 2 days ago, Chevron and Exxon had horrible days. Well, so that entire index went down because of 2 people, right? Boeing had a horrible day, okay? That takes that average down. So when we follow the Dow Jones Industrial as the market, you're basing your entire economic feeling, your situation on 30 companies. See? Right.
Yeah.
And so I use the S&P more as a marker. The problem with the S&P 500 from the newsmaker's standpoint is when it goes down.
Excuse me for not knowing. What does S&P stand for?
Oh, it's Standard & Poor's. And they are a rating. Okay. Yeah, they are a rating agency. So typically, if you want to know, is American Airlines a company we should invest in? Well, Standard & Poor's will rate their balance sheet.
I gotcha. So they're kind of like a credit reporting company, only they are a different. I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's mainly what they do, but then they have several other things. So the S&P 500, so they group 500 businesses that they think is a good representation of the economy, and that is the S&P 500 number that you see, okay?
Ah, okay.
So the thing is, though, is the value of the S&P is only about 2,000, 2,900, right? So if you have a 2% drop, well, that's only like $40. That's not a good headline. But when the Dow Jones Industrial, which is at 23,000, drops 2%, well, that's $500 loss. Oh my goodness. And that is literally how they explain it. Oh, the market dropped 500 points today. No, the Dow Jones Industrial dropped 500 points. Or 2%. 2%. Would you be shocked? Would you be panicked if you knew the stock market went down 2% today? No, that's kind of normal. It goes up. But they always report the number that will get the most scare, or the most, oh, I got to tune back in 30 more minutes, I got to see if my investments are about to fall off no, they're not about to fall off the planet. Because at the end of the day, even a business can't produce stuff. They still have a tangible value. They own businesses, they own equipment, they own, intellectual property and things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of times the news people, and I'm going to tell you, every one of them does it. Again, but they want the headline. You know, hey, tune back in.
This was something that I actually interviewed. I don't know if you ever knew Randy Jennings. I interviewed him. He was he does sports reporting and stuff, but he did it for the local Grand Prairie paper for a long time, and now with Dallas Morning News. But we kind of touched on this, and I think that this was before all this happened. But I think it's very important that we discuss headlines for a second, and I think that you made a very good point. And I know this has nothing to do with financial information at the moment, but I think that it has a lot to do with what keeps you up at night, that we're going to talk about in a second. It's very important that people realize, and if you've never done studies on how to get people to click on stuff, if you're just a regular person, okay, all you do is post on Facebook. You don't understand that there are people that have a living just from making headlines. And their job is to make sure that they have written it in such a way that you are going to be interested, not to get into the article, but to share the article. They don't really care if you read it. They just want you to click on it. And I think it's very important for lay people to understand that, because when you say it's a scary headline, that's about it, it makes me feel better because now I've done a little bit more research. I don't know if you have that opinion, but I wish that people would do a little bit more studying about that kind of thing. Okay,
well, see, now you're going to make me actually admit my guilt here. Okay, so I do a seminar on Social Security. Hey, you're cruising Social Security. Is it going to be there? All that stuff, right? And so we ran it a couple of times, and I wanted to up my attendance, so I hired a copywriter.
Of course.
To make it come across as glaring as possible. Not bad, not bad. But yeah, no, so you're 100% correct in that. And yeah, even I do that as a part of advertising and marketing. How can I make sure that you look at this, right?
That's right.
And yeah, so that's where, and I try to do a couple of different trusted sources when I'm looking at news headlines and things like that. And then, I mean, on the financial side, of course, I have some other just industry stuff and that most folks either don't know is there or wouldn't even know where to look. And so those are things that I can go to as well. But let's flip to your side. If I was buying a house, I mean, I've never bought a house without a realtor. I've sold one without a realtor one time, but I had a good friend that was kind of helping me through, and it was kind of one of those. Anyway, I have really come to learn the value of a professional in whatever field it is. You know, there's just so much that you don't know. And I've always said my biggest competitor in this business is the do-it-yourselfer.
Oh, of course.
The problem is they don't know what they don't know.
Right. That's true. And there's nothing, that is what we're in. We're in a technological society. We're in an environment where we use the internet. All of us that are local business owners have to know how to use keyword searches. And this is how you need to, because people aren't going to find you otherwise. I'm more talking about the headlines that are designed specifically to be misleading or to be not factual. And I want people to just make sure that if anything, you're looking at all that. Going back to kind of tie it into what you're talking about, when you see all these things and you see NASDAQ, you see S&P, you see all this stuff in the stock markets, this and that and the other, and this is what you're bombarded with every day, it's really hard not to feel stressed out about everything.
Right.
And
absolutely.
And so it's hard. This is the kind of stuff that you worry about all night long. So I think that it's important for people to, number one, be able to determine context of the things that they're reading. But number two, sometimes just stop reading it.
Yeah.
And then just go talk to somebody that can help you through some of the things you're feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the things that I offer as I'm networking and meeting folks, and we talk about chambers and different places like that, is say, if you have a question, call me. Just call me. Okay, you don't have to retain services. No, just call me. Because you know what? I would rather help you make an educated decision than for you to come back to me and say, okay, I got this problem. How do I fix it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's the same in your realm. People say, wow, how hard can it be? Well, it's not hard until you screw it up. And then, you didn't know something.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if I think that I can share do you want to talk about this document for a second? Because I think that it's a really good one.
Absolutely. It's a really good one. And you gave me so much credit for it earlier, but I can't take credit for all of it. So let me take one step back and kind of throw, because I'm not sure if I mentioned this. So I work for Farmers Financial Solutions. All right. So we're a division of Farmers Insurance. Basically, we're a brokerage. So we don't have any investments ourselves. What we do is we use the best of the best financial firms out there and use their investment opportunities. Okay. So the cool thing about that is you're never going to get me putting you in a position where I'm going to do what's best for me, best for my company, because my company doesn't have investments. We're going to shop the best for you. Okay. That being said, one of those companies is Massachusetts Financial Solutions, MFS, and you can go ahead and throw that up.
Sure.
So they actually put this together for me. And so basically, and this is a very catchy headline like we talked about, is basically what keeps you up at night. And so you'll see a list of all kinds of things. And I mentioned to you earlier that the joke about, well, what do I do? Well, really, it's what do I not do that is a shorter list. So we have put together all of these different categories that people worry about, right? So some it's retirement, sometimes it's how can I get my kids to college? What if I lose a job? It's on there, okay? And so what MFS has done is they've put together some material, 2 to 3 pages on each of these topics. So if you or anybody that's watching, is interested, this is not any sales material. This is, do I need a will? I think that one's on there. Do I need an estate? Not unless you have over $11 million of assets, but there's some other caveats in there. And so this is how I can get people information that they need. How do I create a budget? All kinds of things that are on there.
How do I teach little kids about money?
Yeah.
How do I have financial discussions with family? See, these are such excellent questions.
Yeah, huge.
Not only do I do real estate, but I also have an estate sale company. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of these kind of discussions that happen, and it's very hard for a lot of people to do. To talk about money with family, to talk about how mom's stuff is going to be divided up, or how mom, all that stuff is hard. And I love that these questions are on there. I do. I think that's the ability to discuss all this stuff and think about it ahead of time is what removes a lot of those anxieties from a lot of people.
Exactly.
It's the unexpected that is hard.
Right. Absolutely. And you'll see the section there, life events, right? I mean, life happens, if you've lived much of any of your life at all, unexpected things and life events happen,
Yeah.
And, so this is something, like I said, that I offer up, and you can shoot me an email with it. You don't necessarily have to check it off. You can, just send the questions over that you're interested in. And I gladly will, just put that little packet together and then email it back to you. Again, because, like we have really based this discussion on, is a lot of times people live in fear of things that they don't have to worry about. And then the second side of that is when something happens suddenly to you, did you have a plan in place, or do you have any idea where to go for help?
Right. And elder care, I think, is something that a lot of people are facing. I know that maybe it's just because I'm in the industry and I talk about this so often, but I think this is something a lot of people that are in there, especially people that are in their late 50s, 60s, that are that are getting up in age themselves a little bit, but still have living parents that are elderly. And I'm learning that there's a very it's interesting, because our life expectancy has now gone up so high that we have people that are retiring themselves, but then also taking care of their parents that are still
the retired person. Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people's, they don't know where to go and they don't know what to do. And I think that's a very, very important resource to have available for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just share just a little personal story. And there's no experience like walking through it yourself. And I guess it was about 2016. My mother-in-law was 70 at the time, and she would go out.
So we can see
Yeah, that's fine. She would go out, and I know, right? She would go out and walk a mile every day. Did her annual physical. The doctor said, "Well, hey, come on back." So she went back in, and they said, "You have cancer." and total shock to her, just could not believe it. Well, she lived way out in New Mexico. I won't say where, but because it's just New Mexico. Anyway, but my wife works in the medical industry here in DFW, so her natural response is, okay, Mom, pack your bag. Pack your bag, get 6 weeks worth of clothes, come on down here, we're going to get you the best of the best, right? And so she came down in, that would be April of 2016, yeah, and packed her 6 weeks worth of clothes, and came down, and it was unfortunately stage 4. And so to really kind of condense it, she was never able to go back home. She never had that strength again. And unfortunately, in January of 2017, so less than a year later, she passed away, here at the house. And there's so much that from what I do for a living, number one, I had to put it in place. You sell houses all the time. Have you ever sold somebody else's house in another state? That was just, and then who do you trust? Who do you get? And so, but then also the elder care situation. Can we put her in, is putting her in a facility the proper thing? Or, can we hire somebody in? And then of course, we're scared about her running out of money through all of that time. And we're both working, my wife and I, full time, and all of those things. And so there was so much that I learned. Number one, about elder care, about having those types of life insurances and things like that in place, and then those steps and emotions that you're going to walk through. And that's what we kind of based our conversation on, walking through those emotions and those steps. And so, life can be a very, very good instructor on different lessons. So.
It really can. And you brought that up, and that's something I hear a lot of is I had another friend of mine who actually said, my mom lives in, I don't remember, it was like in the Panhandle, I think, and we don't know anybody that's over there. She doesn't know anybody that's over there. She's going to come live with us. Do you know anybody that can help us also do her estate sale and sell her house? Yeah. And so there is a lot of that, and there's a lot of you're having to trust people to kind of help you. And and then there's also the emotions of the person that's having to move and uproot their life at the very end and do all this. But and something else too that I'm become very passionate about. This is something that right now I think is, I want people to understand there's still value in your home. We have not gone completely down in all this stuff. I'm afraid that people are going to start selling their houses to investors because they think nobody wants to buy it. And I'm very concerned about our elderly population that is going to lose a lot of equity off their house right now. And if there's anything I can say is that with you and a financial advisor next to me, make sure that before you make any large decisions, you definitely talk to a professional, maybe even more than one, to get some opinions, especially if you're dealing with siblings that you're all having to make a decision together. And don't think everything is so dire that you just have to give it all away or make a rash decision. Because equity in your house and all that money matters at the end of your life. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you in that. And Warren Buffett says it best is, is if you can keep, a cool head when things are chaotic, you're going to come out the winner, and that's the same thing on my front is people rushing in to start taking Social Security because they're afraid I'm not going to be able to find a job because, well, who's going to hire a 65-year-old? We saw that happen in 2008. And it's really interesting if you look at the chart of how many people go into retirement on an average year, you see a huge spike in 2008. And
hold on just 1 second.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, you can get chips. Sorry, I'll cut this part out. That's my daughter. She knows that I do interviews and stuff, but she's like, I don't need to interrupt, but can I have a snack?
She totally, oh, that's so cute. Yeah, she said jump in there. Yeah, I'm surprised that you haven't seen a cat jump in, or I haven't had anybody walk through either. So, we're good.
So my dog just walked up, and she is 11. But the other day I was talking to somebody, and she went under my feet like she normally does. Well, the camera connected. So from my monitor, they could still see me somehow, but I couldn't see anything on my screen. And I'm like, are y'all still there? I don't know what's going on. Am I recording? I don't know. I was like, no.
How funny.
End of the recording, I was like, please tell me I didn't just lose an hour worth of really good interview stuff.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. My very first Zoom. So I have, well, I call them little ones. Good night. They're 9 and 7 now. I don't know what happened to my babies, but anyway, so they were here, and then we have a blended family. We have 5 kids combined. Okay, so we have, and so I go into the master bath, right? And I'm sitting there leaning against the cat. So I'm using a virtual background. And the cat decides to come and see what's going on. And it looks like he's standing on my head with a virtual background, and so,
I love that. That is so.
Yeah. So, but they're just chilling right now. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's good.
But yeah, so like just what we were talking about, I think that's
Yeah.
really important. I think it is important to have a level head, and it's really important not to just totally dip off the deep end of just thinking everything is just really horrible, because it's really not. I mean, it is, but it's not going to stay that way for a really long time.
Right. Yeah, and that's what a lot of folks in my industry are banking on, is that the economy can be started rather quickly, and it can really rev back up to pace where it was in relatively short order.
So another question that you answered that I thought maybe, I don't know if you could touch on this for a second.
Yeah.
Along the same lines of the oil barrel pricing, we were talking about how they were having trouble storing it. And one of my friends, I think, asked me if you wanted to get into that type of investment, like if you wanted to invest in it, how would you do that? And you say you can't. This isn't an investment, But I've heard a lot of people talk about wanting to get into the investment and kind of try to take advantage of some of the things that are going on in the stock market.
Right.
So if someone had never done that before,
Right.
Like, what would you tell them, number one, not to do at the very beginning? Like, don't get on an app. I don't know.
Yes, please do not get on an app. Okay. It's called Robin Hood for a reason, because he took from the rich, he gave to the poor. So if he's anyway, okay. Sorry, I digress. Yeah. So okay. So typical stock investing is you are buying part ownership of that company. Okay. I will tell you that one of the things I don't put a lot on my resume, but I'm actually part owner of the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, before you get too impressed, talk about the marketing, right? Several years back, they are a publicly traded company. It's very closely held, very hard to buy in, but they want to make stadium improvements. So they said, we've got an idea. Let's sell people 1 share of ownership of the Green Bay Packers. I think I paid like $250 for it. At the time, I wasn't a financial advisor, and I was telling a friend of mine, a lady friend that was, and I said, hey, I'm going to buy some of the Green Bay Packers. And she's like, but Todd, they don't pay any dividends. I'm like, yeah, I know. It will never go up in value. Yeah, I know. It's really probably worth about a quarter. And I said, yeah, I know. And then all of a sudden, you could just see it all over her face. She's like, it's a man thing. And I'm like, pretty much. This is my only opportunity to own any sports franchise, okay? So I have a certificate of 1 share of probably 10 million shares, but I got 1, right? Okay, but because I am literally an owner of the Green Bay Packers. Now, some people will often ask me, do you even like the Green Bay Packers? I own them, so, okay. So all of that to say, when you buy a share of stock, you are a part owner of that company, okay? So you can look at companies and see where they're going to go, where their track record is. Okay. You can look at Johnson & Johnson. I mentioned them earlier. You can look at all of these different companies and see what their track record is. Okay. So that's how we keep from having huge spikes in the ups and downs of the stock market. Okay. Now, something like this comes along. Of course, every company's value has the potential to shrink, right? Okay. All of that to say, you are owning a part of that company, okay? Now, that is the stock market. There is a commodities market, okay? And commodities, you're not buying businesses, you're buying products. So you're buying wheat, you're buying corn, you're buying oil, right? Okay, so kind of on our discussion about oil the other day was, you buy in that particular realm, you buy contracts for oil. So you have until the 21st of the month to buy oil, and they promise to deliver it by the end of the next month. Okay. So what happened the other day with this little flip and inversion is there's always some guys that are going to make a little bit of extra money. So what they did is they bought the contracts early in the month when they were cheap, because they knew there's always somebody, there's always Johnny running late, right? And they were waiting for that guy to come in and say, hey, we need to buy up some more oil for May delivery. Well, we're all staying at home. The planes are sitting around, so nobody came running in. They have this oil. They have to take control of it within a month. They don't own a refinery. They don't own tanks. They don't own tankers or anything like that. They can't receive it. It's not like you can just go down to a warehouse and, drop 10 billion, gallons of oil there, right? So what they did is they had to sell the paper for whatever they could get for it. Well, again, there's people out there going, oh, we're not buying it. We're not buying it. And then the value decreases until it even, like you said, went negative. Well, it went negative. It didn't mean that everybody could go out and buy as much as they wanted at a negative price. No, it meant that there was too much supply, too much on paper, that these guys could not physically take control of because they didn't have any tanks anywhere. And so that's why it flipped, and they had 2 days to sell it, or they were going to have to store it or do something else with it, right? So then those 2 days come and go into the month. Now we're into the June selling month, right? So now it's back up to $20, $30 a barrel, which is still really cheap, not what we want it to be. So that's how you have that just kind of one-time inversion flip. Again, some of the guys in the administration said they saw it coming, but thought maybe it won't happen. But then it did, So that's kind of one of those things. Okay, so how to invest?
So now it's flipped back up to 20 to 30.
Yeah, 20, 30, yeah.
So we just talked, 3 days ago? 2 days ago?
Right.
Wow, okay.
Well, because the end of the contract, the end of the buying period ended on the 22nd, which was yesterday. This is the 20th. They have 2 days to sell this.
I see. Okay.
And then, okay, that's for May delivery. Okay, May delivery. So if we were oil folks and we said, hey, we want to buy some oil for our refinery, okay, but we want it delivered in May, they're like, nope, May's closed. This is for June delivery.
I understand. Okay. All right.
You see how it kind of, yeah.
Yes.
So again, makes for a great headline. Oil is negative. They're going to be paying you to fill up your cars. What does this mean? The world's coming to an end. Not really, And again, it's
let's all go out and drive and use gas.
yeah, let's go. And then tomorrow they're going to be paying us. No, this is for May delivery to a refinery that's going to take 2 months to refine. It's not going to get to the gas station for another 6 months from now,
Yeah.
And so, we kind of put it in perspective. Okay. So, so you can, as a person, invest in the commodities market, and there's some trade houses that will do that for you. But as we just talked about, the commodities market goes up and down. It is the riskiest place to be invested in. Okay. Now, if you have billions of dollars and you know what you're doing, then you can make a lot of really good money there. We saw some folks that thought they were going to make good money and overbought on oil and wound up losing money. So that's the commodities market is a different place. And so that's why we don't invest a lot of retirement money or college savings money in the commodities market, because it can flash in a heartbeat. One bad year of corn, it can wipe out a lot of stuff. So how can you use this to your advantage? Well, so a couple of things, and you're going to die laughing when I tell you this. You can invest in a company that has major super tankers because they're contracting them to store oil right now.
Oh.
Just set off the coast with 2 million gallons of oil, and we're going to pay you. I saw an interview with the CEO the other day, and I think it cost about $100,000 a month to store the oil right now.
Wow.
And normally it's about $30,000 to $40,000 a month.
Wow.
So invest in that company. The oil refineries are going to start churning out gas again, and all the different byproducts. So, there are all kinds of different opportunities. You always have to keep in consideration, what is your risk level and what's appropriate for you and your time horizon. but, not necessarily focus on this one thing, but step back and say, okay, who's going to benefit from this? How is this going to work out? And so there's some interesting opportunities.
That's a very good way of looking at it. And I think that's just so brilliant to think about. It's not this thing, it's the thing over here, or it might be this thing over that way, or
Right.
a different way of looking at it. And if you are somebody that, I'm really fascinated with all this right now, just because I think it's so interesting. And I started hearing a little bit about like oil reserves and some stuff going on along the way, and everybody has their ideas about how all this works, but I don't really, So does the government, and I don't know, this might be off on a tangent, but can the government invest in the stock market? Not government employees or elected officials. I mean the actual government.
The actual government. That is an interesting question. So for the most part, I will say no, okay? As far as stocks are concerned, because then the government would actually own part of a business.
I'll say this. Can they legally invest in this?
Right. Well, they would own part of a business. And so one of the things about our free market system is the government doesn't own businesses per se. I will be honest with you that there have been some talks during all of this stimulus stuff to say, okay, we're going to give you some money, but you're going to give us shares of stock. Okay. There is one side that is.
Now you're saying what I'm getting at here.
Yeah. There's one side that's way against that, saying, no, we could never do that. Then the other side is saying, well, but the last time we gave them a tax break, they did things to boost their profits that they probably shouldn't have done. In hindsight, okay. So that's where, that really is a steep political debate.
Yeah.
On that. So that's.
And I think that, kind of, because I was thinking in my head about, where's all this money coming from and all that stuff. But I also was thinking, as you were talking about oil, and I was thinking there's a difference between oil and gas. There's a difference between the stock market and the S&P and all those other differences. There's also a difference between the Fed dropped the interest rate. And what people think is, well, that has to be mortgage rates, right? And so all these different things have all different meanings than what we assume that they are.
Right. Yeah, when you say, oh, the Fed dropped interest rates, everybody's like, oh, mortgages are going down. No, they only have control over one interest rate, which is what banks charge each other to store money overnight. And that's really all they have control over, and then the system works itself out. When that is at 0 to 0.25, well, then that's when you see mortgage rates go down, well, how low are they going to go? Well, it depends on several other factors.
Right.
Outside of that.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And that's one of the things, again, it's just a way of looking at it, like oil and gas are not the same. Yes, gas comes from oil, but oil is different than that. And
okay, so let me confuse you a little further.
Sure.
There was only one type of oil that got inverted, and it's West Texas Intermediate crude. Okay. There's several other different types, and so it comes out of the ground. They used to call West Texas oil light sweet crude because it had less harsh chemicals inside of it that they had to get out when they were refining it. So they really liked that kind of oil. There's another type of oil called Brent crude. And that's what you find mainly in Europe and then some other places in the United States, okay? So the Brent trading system or the purchase system is different from the West Texas Intermediate. West Texas Intermediate flipped negative because you have to receive it. The Brent did not. So not only was it just one type, you see how this can, when you start taking, it's like an onion. When you start taking a layer and another, okay, now we're seeing where we're going,
That is so interesting. I think that, man, everybody needs to listen to this. I could talk to you about this forever because I feel like there's so many different things going on right now that you hear one thing and you don't hear the other. And another thing too, maybe you could speak to this. I don't know if any of you guys are talking about this right now. One of the other questions I get, it's a financial question, is if we're supposed to be at this pandemic, wouldn't that mean that hospitals are supposed to be busier? So, but they're not. So, and then and the other question is, if we're out of all these supplies and they can't get these supplies, how are we all buying these supplies?
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like there's something that maybe a little bit more understanding.
Yeah. No, you're completely right on. I saw a headline the other day, right? So we're under pandemic, right? Hospital lays off employees. I'm like, whoa, okay, hold on. We got to see what this is about. Okay.
Right.
All right, let's talk a little further. Doctors group files for bankruptcy. Whoa, hold on. Okay. So now we back up to see, okay, what's going on? Well, the particular hospital, hospitals are not allowed to do non-elective surgeries right now, right? And even some other surgeries are being pushed off, right? Hey, you need a knee replacement? Kind of got a pandemic going, Okay, I'll hobble around for a couple more weeks.
In my house, because I'm not around here.
Yeah, because I can't go anywhere, right? And they're like, where are you going anyway? Anyway, so, all right. So
not to be little knee surgeries, but
Right. Yeah, so you have a whole wings of hospitals that have no patients, right? Because that's their outpatient, that's their elective, that's their whole, and so it's those parts of the hospital where you see, okay, this is extra revenue that they bring a ton of money in that has been shut down to zero. Okay, yeah, they have an influx over here, but it's still not making up because, you don't have a lot of surgeries with what I'm understanding, in the pandemic. So you have certain things that used to make hospitals a lot of money, and then on the other side, they're not. So that's where the economic dynamic is so interesting right now around, the medical field, so that's kind of where that is. So I mentioned earlier, my wife actually works in the medical field, and yeah, she works for a big conglomerate of doctors here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and she couldn't get an N95 mask. And so I went to Facebook, and I said, hey, y'all all know my wife. Can anybody help us out? Two guys responded, and then the next day I had 2 or 3 masks for her. They worked in the construction and other industry, and they had bought them, months ago because they normally have them, But as far as trying to buy some brand new, they couldn't or didn't, we'll just leave that at that. So
that was a question that I had for somebody that was a friend of mine who she was like, okay, I just bought a bunch of masks and I'm about to donate them. And my question was, this was like 3 days ago. And I was like, why are we still having trouble with this? I don't understand. Like, we're all buying masks. Why is the hospital not buying masks?
Right. Yeah, and it's the N95 mask, so it's the super technical level, right? So that's one of them. The doctors group that she works for still hasn't bought them. So it's
not that there's a shortage of supply.
I think we've turned that corner where there's not necessarily a shortage. Now it's a matter of can we afford that expense? Because, those are not cheap. And when you're a conglomerate, and then what do they use, one a day or one a patient, or, they're still buying the surgical mask, and then again, too, they're taking other precautions like measuring people's temperature before they come in the office and things like that. So they feel they have it mitigated. So, they feel they have it mitigated. My wife is like, yeah, y'all go on and mitigate and I'm going to wear masks, so that's kind of where I think that division lies. So
yeah, and it's hard because a lot of people, I always say, I know that y'all think that hospitals are in the business of helping people, but you have to realize they are in a business. There is this is still an industry that makes money. There's still a whole thing that there's supply chains, there's contracts that they have to follow. Like for example, if they're in a contract with a supplier to buy masks at a certain price, and now all of a sudden every single hospital goes around and is like, we all need all these masks. Well, it's not that that you can't make more masks. It's just you can't get them all the same day.
Yeah.
Then you're in a contract to pay for them for a certain price. And, so there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that make it hard for people to understand. Like, I don't understand, why can't we just get more masks?
Right.
Yeah. Or any type of, equipment or stuff. So people are still, what I like that people are doing is still trying to go out, buy the stuff, donate the stuff, ask the nurses,
Right.
people what they need, because I think that
Mhm.
that's probably the fastest way they're going to get certain things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Or letting their 3D printers print those little things in the back so that their little ears aren't hurting.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
I love that. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, you know? I mean,
It's one of the reasons I feel very comfortable about our economy. And I think that what I can tell everybody is there's a place for all of us to be in this economy, even if you don't have a job. There's always things that you could, there's something that you can offer the world in our,
right.
that is viable, something that someone will pay you to do, or that people will pay for your information. And so I love that we live in an economy where things can turn around just like that.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, I'm a true entrepreneur at heart, and I think everybody needs to be one too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the same thing in my field. People just don't come running to me, and you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit to get out there, to be creative, to be different, to ask people what's keeping them up at night.
Yeah. So if people wanted to find you, where would they go?
Oh, that's a great question. So, that really is a good question. Okay, and here's why. Because I work for an agency, so everything that I have, so I don't have a website and things like that. So you can just look me up. Todd Mayo, Keller, Texas on Facebook. If you want to do that, I'm on LinkedIn. My email address is horrid, but it's compliant. Or you can just frankly, on there is my my phone number as well, and just give me a call.
Well, that's good. I'm gonna make sure to post your information, at least
okay.
The link to some places that I know to find you. And
yeah,
so I really appreciate you talking to me today.
Absolutely, absolutely. I knew this would be lots of fun, and I'm glad that it is. I think we've talked about everything under the sun, plus a couple things. So.
Oh no, we could talk about a lot more. We could have a whole another hour or two.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. So.
Well, thank you again. Have a nice day.
All right, thanks.
Go walk around your backyard one more time.
What's that?
I said, go walk around your backyard one more time.
One more time. Yeah, that's literally what I'm going to go do. So maybe we'll go out front, but I don't want the neighbors to be out there because they like to talk a lot.
Then you have to actually talk to people.
All right.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.